Good morning and welcome back to the Great Journey podcast series. We're continuing our read aloud of Tiger's Great Journey. We're finishing the second part of chapter 2, which is called Courtesy on the Bridge. Can everybody see that? Great. The air grew crisp as Tiger and Blake set out across a great forest at the top of the cliff on which Tiger had discovered his courage. As they hiked silently up the sloping terrain of the woods, Tiger enjoyed a sense of wonder about the towering trees, the colorful plants beneath them, and the birds and mammals he knew were watching as they walked gently and with great respect through the animals' home. Tiger carried the map that he had found with him. It was safely tucked away in his pack in the pouch he had found it in. Just before starting this leg of their journey, he had referred to it and was using it as a guide. His destination was Ryoku Mountain and the Temple of the Clouds. They trekked for miles through the forest until the trees gave way to a rocky and steep plateau. As they passed the last of the trees, Tiger turned and bowed to the majestic forest they'd moved safely through. Blake giggled to see Tiger bowing to trees. He knew that this journey was not just important to Tiger, but it had totally consumed him. To Tiger, becoming a black belt Shoka leader was the most important thing he could possibly do with his life. It gave him a sense of order and purpose, and it made him feel connected to something bigger than himself. Nothing was going to stop him from getting to the top of Ryoku Mountain and the Temple of the Clouds. This was not an ordinary hike. It was a spiritual quest. Tiger was finding himself, who he was meant to be. He had seen so many people suffer because of problems in the world, and he wanted to play a role in finding a solution to at least some of those problems. But he knew that no one would pay attention to him as he was, so he would have to become someone greater. This journey would enable him to do that. It would transform him into the leader he was called to be. Blake looked at the forest and saw the beauty and vastness that Tiger saw. He became aware that all people rely on the wonders of nature, which must be respected. Tiger bowed again to the forest, took one last look at the explosion of life beneath the trees, and then turned and motioned to Blake to move on. They walked for hours across the rocks, stopping now and again to rest or to scoop cool, clear water from natural basins in the stone. Tiger became aware that he was able to walk farther and farther without resting, and that the muscles of his legs were becoming stronger. He liked the way his body felt as he and Blake climbed toward a high point. He wondered what awaited them on the other side. When they crested the stony point, Tiger couldn't believe his eyes. The land fell off sharply into a great, deep canyon. How will we ever cross it? He asked. Blake raised a hand to point off to their right. We'll cross there, he said. Tiger squinted and searched, and at last noticed what appeared to be a fine line across the top of the canyon. As they walked closer to it, Tiger could see that it was a narrow, rope walking bridge suspended high above the canyon floor. Noticing how it swayed in the breeze made Tiger feel uneasy. When the two of them reached the beginning of the footbridge, Tiger realized that because the bridge was so narrow, they would have no choice but to cross it single file. The flimsy bridge looked to be a mile long and 1,000 feet above the canyon. The thought of crossing it made him tremble. He was reminded again of something simple that Sensei had told him. Stay focused. In this situation, he knew the goal was to get to the other side. This was simple to understand, but very, very difficult to do. Without looking down, Tiger gazed across the bridge and then placed his right foot lightly on the first ancient plank. As he did, it dropped just enough to frighten him. He glanced back at Blake, who was close behind. Blake had seen what had happened and nodded at Tiger to let him know that he was with him. The bridge, which was made entirely of rope except for the wooden planks, swung a bit to the left and then to the right, causing Tiger to grip the rope rails for dear life. He got a queasy feeling in his stomach and knew that he couldn't look down. He focused his attention on the task before him and quieted his fears. Look straight ahead, Tiger said to Blake. Feel the strength of the bridge. It will move, but it will not break. Stay focused on taking one step at a time. Tiger didn't know how he knew this, but he just knew it to be true. He took a deep breath and felt his tense muscles relax a bit. Rather than tense up with every motion of the bridge, he began to move in harmony with it. His fear gave way to an intense appreciation of the fine old bridge and the fantastic canyon below. But what was this? Gazing far ahead, he saw that on the other end, a large group of people were moving single file onto the bridge. Had the people not noticed him and Blake? The bridge was so narrow that it would be impossible for the two parties to pass. He and Blake had come so far, and they had started across long before the other group. Tiger decided to keep going and hope the strangers would back off when they realized they had entered a bridge that was already in use and that they should have waited for him and Blake to make it all the way across. The large group stopped. Tiger thought this was strange, but they were still too far away from him to make out what they were doing. It appeared that most just stood and waited, while two or three people in the back knelt on the bridge. In time, the entire group began moving again, slowly toward Tiger and Blake. At last, the two parties moved close enough together for Tiger to see that a tall, powerful looking man was in front of what appeared to be several families whose members, old and young, carried trunks and cases and baskets. They seemed to be crossing the bridge while weighed down with everything they owned in the world. When Tiger and Blake drew close, he thought again about how far they had come and how they could make it across the bridge in only a few minutes. If there was not this long line of people in front of them, of course. Tiger noticed that the man who appeared to be the leader wore a scowl on his face. He ordered his people to stop. Then he shouted to Tiger and Blake, "Halt!" They stopped about 30 feet from him. The man signaled to the three young men who carried swords and looked to be warriors, and the four of them stepped forward on the heavily burdened, swaying bridge. Tiger was worried. These strangers looked mean, and there was no room on this bridge for a fight. The leader had a red face and appeared angry as his men stepped up and stopped only a few feet away. Tiger greeted them with a deep, respectful bow. Why he did that, he didn't know, but it seemed like the right thing to do. At the same time, he watched them closely. The strangers appeared to be surprised by Tiger's bow, and the leader bowed slightly in return. His warriors did the same. Then the leader stiffened his back and barked, "Go back or prepare to fight. My people need to cross this bridge, and you are in our way." Tiger spoke to him calmly. "But we entered the bridge long before you did, and only have a short distance to go." "Silence!" the leader shouted as his warriors squeezed the grips of their swords. "We have no time for this. We were forced to leave our village, and now we are escaping a fearsome enemy. We cannot wait for you to pass over the bridge and are placing ourselves in peril while stopping to talk to you. Back off the bridge or prepare to die." Tiger thought the pounding of his heart would split open his chest, but he bowed again, this time lowering his eyes to the stranger's feet. Then he spoke. "We are in no hurry to cross this bridge, but there is a great urgency in your crossing. So we will turn back, and if you so permit, to allow you to move more quickly, we will help your people carry their belongings." With those words, the looks on the strangers' faces softened. The leader shook his head in amazement. "You are kind. Thank you. Please forgive my behavior, but we are weary and are in fear of our lives. We will be grateful for your help in getting across the bridge." With that, he and his men bowed. Seeming to remember something, the leader added, "We stopped a while back to loosen some of the planks on the bridge to slow our enemy. I do not want you to be hurt, so when we get to the other side, I will have a couple of our young men accompany you to the loosened planks and ensure that you cross them safely." "Many thanks to you," Tiger said. Blake and Tiger walked toward the fleeing people, hoisted two heavy trunks on their shoulders, turned around, and carried the trunks clear to the end of the bridge where they had started. When everyone reached that side, the leader thanked Tiger and Blake again and wished them a safe journey. The two boys in turn wished them the same and said they hoped the people would find a better, safer place to live. The two groups parted as friends. Tiger, Blake, and the two young warriors then set out once again across the bridge with the warriors in the lead. From having walked back and forth along the bridge, Tiger and Blake now had their legs and could move fast without the fear of slipping. When they got to the loosened planks, the warriors made sure that Tiger and Blake crossed safely before heading back to catch up with their people. Once they made it to the end of the bridge, Blake sighed deeply. "Oh, I thought we were going to have to fight out there," he said. Tiger replied, "Sensei told me that sometimes there's no avoiding a fight, but most of the time we can use our training and our intelligence to prevent violence." "Like you did when you bowed," Blake said. "I could see that the stranger, who was very angry, started to calm down when you honored him in that way. And he changed completely when you offered our help in carrying their possessions. We learned an important lesson about courtesy today, Blake, one that we will probably have to use often in this journey. It looks like courtesy is our first line of defense. That simple show of respect turned a potential enemy into a friend. What could be better than that?" observed Blake. Tiger told Blake that they should move out of sight because the enemies the fleeing people feared were probably on their way. From the bridge, they headed off to the left and up a gentle slope to nearby hills. Safely out of view, Tiger and Blake could see a small band of warriors far to the south making their way to the footbridge. They were carrying swords, staffs, and clubs, and they jogged in tight formation. Even from this distance, Tiger and Blake could hear the pounding of their feet. The boys knew that they were not to be trifled with. After watching for a while, they looked at the map. "Whoa, Blake!" Tiger said excitedly. "There's an image now of a person bowing on the map above the footbridge and the word courtesy. This map is so cool." Tiger smiled his agreement and then carefully folded the parchment and placed it back in its pouch. He knew this was no ordinary map. Great. Thank you for listening. That's the end of chapter 2 of Tiger's Great Journey. Next time we come back, we'll be starting chapter 3, The Superhuman in All of Us. I hope you have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.